outputting in 4K, I don't even know if it's really that it's worth doing. Who's actually watching 4K footage? Who's actually downloading it and watching it on YouTube? Who's displaying it on YouTube? I mean, I suppose there are a few people out there that have got 4K TVs, and there are a few people out there that have got screens that do 4K, but are they true 4K? Is it 38, 60 or whatever it is instead of 40, 96? There's no actual 4K, it's sort of 3.5K. And my question really is the juice worth the squeeze on 4K? Is the extra effort of having 4K footage for your viewer to view better for the work than 1080p or 2.7K for that matter? And does the end user do they really care what footage resolution they're viewing it, when in some cases they don't actually have the ability or the notion to control that? For instance, if you're watching it on the mobile phone and you're watching it at work, or you're watching it out and about on the bus or in a car or wherever it is that you're watching it, YouTube will optimize it automatically to pick out the best suitable resolution for the bandwidth that you've got. So on 3G, 4G, you might only be viewing it at 480p. Not necessarily going to pick 1080p or even 4K or anything like the footage that you've took your time to edit and film and so on and so forth. And when you're filming it at 4K, are you outputting it at 1080p? So in effect, are you super sampling rather than actually outputting it at 4K? Because I suppose there are some benefits to super sampling. So the 1080p super sample is clearly going to be better than 1080p native, because it's a much bigger, much more accurate product, vision, recording, footage than say native 1080p, which is as big as 1080p is as big as it's going to get. So I suppose there are benefits to doing it in that way. But that aside, that isn't the only consideration when looking at shooting in 4K. 4K isn't the be all and end all. 4K's been out for a long time. It's not a particularly new standard. Cinemas have been filming in 4K for a long time, and IMAXs are filmed in 17K in some cases. 8K, 4K, 6K, they're not new standards. They're new standards to consumers, but they're not new standards to filmmakers. And I'm not so sure that there are enough people watching 4K to warrant the work that goes into filming and outputting a video in 4K. I don't see that not everybody I know has got a 4K TV. And not only that, not all 4Ks are equal either. So you pick a box up in the camera shop and you're walking out and it's shiny new camera and it's 4K written all over the side of the box and everything's there and it looks absolutely fantastic, and you're thinking, oh my god, this is going to be absolutely brilliant, this is going to be absolutely amazing. Well, my phone shoots in 4K. It's a Sony XZ something or other. It shoots in 4K. It's got a 4K screen on it, but it's not 1496, it's 38 something or other. So it's not true 4K, but it's HDR and it's 4K, and it still will display things at 480p when I've not got the right bandwidth. And also, the codec in my phone is not as good as the codec in my camera shooting at 4K, which is not as good as the codec in a top of the range 1DX, for instance, which is equally not as good as a codec in a RED camera. I'm not going to break out the RED and start vlogging on the RED, because filming in 8K is just a monstrous amount of time to get it to a point where it's viewable by the viewer, and it's overwork. You're overworking, and is overworking necessary? Do you need to overwork, or would it be better to just output it at 1080p and have the viewer view what you want in the least amount of work possible with the smallest amount of output, so to speak, but the highest amount of quality for the smallest amount of work. And not only that, that is also not just a single factor either. The codec is only one part of it. There's also weight, there's also usability, there's also time to set up, there's also time to break down. All these things need factoring in when you're filming in 4K, and you don't even know whether your viewer is actually using that 4K or whether they're just viewing it in 1080p because they've only got a 1080p phone, an iPhone or something like that, or an old Android phone, or they're viewing it just on a low bandwidth and they don't have the ability to view it in 4K. So I think that's the question I'm posing myself at the minute is, do I want to super sample? Am I only super sampling? Or should I just stick to doing 1080p and be happy that my customers can see it in a format that's good enough, rather than a format that I think is good enough or should be filmed in because everybody else is saying it's a buzzword and everybody else thinks it's amazing. So yeah, should I film in 4K? I'm beginning to think not, because basically it's just a thing that people think you should do. But there isn't the prevalence out there yet that is showing that, wow, look at this boat. How amazing is that? That was absolutely badass. Really, really cool. That was pretty cool. So yeah, I don't think that we should be filming in 4K just yet. I think that there isn't the take-up yet of 4K that people think there actually is. I think people would like to think there's an amazing take-up of 4K and every single person that's out there has got a 4K TV and a 4K phone and is doing everything they need to do to be able to watch your video in the best possible quality you can shoot it in. But that said, the codec that you've got in your camera might not be the best possible quality you can shoot it in. Your 1080p codec may have had more money spent on it, so to speak, than say your 4K codec, and as such you end up shooting it in a lesser codec, when in actual fact you might have got a better quality video out of a 1080p video. So I think with that, I think it's good to shoot in 4K and probably a super sample, but I wouldn't be necessarily wanting to shoot in 4K to output in 4K, because I don't think that there are people out there that have actually got the 4K ability yet and aren't quite, I don't think the customer is quite there yet, let's say that. And with that, I think I'll end it there.